Hey everyone, I'm Josh. I'm a solutions consultant at Paxate, along with my colleague Jesse. Today we've got Sean from Cymax here, ready to talk all things SMB1001. For the uninitiated and for the small businesses that are out there, could you let us know, what is SMB1001 in a
Certainly.
nutshell?
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. So SMB1001 is, in my opinion, an elegantly simple yet highly detailed, when you peel back the layers, security control standard that has been designed specifically for small and medium businesses in mind. So they have evolved levels of controls ranging from bronze, silver, gold, platinum, all the way through to diamond. And each of those iterations of controls has a number of increasing sub-controls required as part of that. It's been designed specifically so that an organization that doesn't have a standard to align to can at least start with bronze as a milestone, start with a handful of controls that at least means that for the organization, they're able to say and demonstrate that they've met a particular minimum standard of compliance around a internationally recognized cybersecurity framework. I would also add in regards to that the insurance companies are recognizing this as a framework that is demonstratable to them to reduce the risk for the insurance provider, and as a byproduct, the insurance providers are offering, let's call it a consideration or a mild reduction in their policy as a result of organizations aligning to the SMB 1001 standard.
He said my favorite phrase, reduce risk. To me, that's everything that a security strategy needs to boil down to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I really like about SMB 1001 is it allows small businesses to actually reduce the risk that's relevant to them. It's a framework that's built for what the threats are that they're facing today, and it's not them trying to align to something that's built for an enterprise organization.
I completely agree. And if you look at it historically, what did we have here in Australia? We had Essential 8, which is not a standard. It's certainly something that an organization can align to, but we have ISO 27001, we have SOC 2, we have NIST, we have CIS, and these are great. These are fantastic standards. But for a lot of small businesses, if you went to implement those, you'd almost break the organization. So, like I said, the elegance of simplicity means that a small business can start to deploy this in palatable chunks, which improves their cyber prevention posture without breaking the organization.
Now, Sean, obviously you are quite knowledgeable on the SMB 1001 side. Talk to us a little bit about what your journey is within SMB 1001. Why are we here talking to you today?
I think, I suspect part of the reason that we're having this conversation today is because I have been quite vocal in regards to the SMB 1001 standard as a whole. I don't mind saying it, and I think those that are responsible for the standard as a whole will appreciate my statement that initially when I saw it, I kind of scoffed, thinking to myself, this shouldn't be called SMB 1001, it should be SMB 101. These are some basic things that any organization should be doing, and candidly, our client base has been doing beyond the minimum standard of SMB 1001 for as long as I can remember. But we started to peel back the layers of the controls, and as part of that process, there was a depth that wasn't there at first sight, and I got to appreciate the maturity of the sentence that said initiate VPNs or maintain a digital asset register, and I very quickly realized that these are things that all organizations should be doing, that in some cases we assumed some of our clients were doing and they're not, and all organizations really should. So whilst we're talking about fundamental things here, the thing I guess that I valued the most about it is that it brought things that we assumed organizations were doing to the forefront and gave us the ability to have that conversation. Yes, I think that like any one of the security standards that we have, no one of them will cover an organization 100%. None of them do. But for an organization that doesn't have anything, trying to go from nothing to ISO 27001 with a fully blown ISMS is a significant undertaking. And I believe that organizations should do that. But why not pick up bronze or silver or gold or diamond as part of your overall holistic security cyber prevention posture?
I think you've hit the nail on the head when you've said that some of these things are things that we would think that everyone's doing, and that they can be basic. When I look at the SMB space, however, I think I find that quite often what we think is something that everyone should be doing is quite often something that people aren't doing. I guess, what complications are there in the SMB space that this standard helps solve?
I'm going to answer that question in a slightly different way, because I think that organizations fall into two categories. There are the CEOs of organizations that I've seen, and the board of directors, who have been incredibly responsible about the data that they sit on. They have taken the position that they are the custodians of other people's information. And then there's another percentage of organizations who do things purely out of compliance, so legislative or insurance requirements. As an MSP community, there is a large percentage of those that I do some coaching and mentoring with who just aren't comfortable having a conversation with their client and saying things like, you should be at this minimum cyber prevention posture. And we're in October 2025, and at a conference recently, a colleague of mine got up on stage, and while he was talking about his service catalog, one of the questions from the room was multi-factor authentication. And in my mind, I wasn't thinking, why are we having the conversation about multi-factor authentication in 2025? I was thinking to myself, haven't we already had this conversation back in 2016, 2017? Like, these are things that most organizations should be doing. The unfortunate thing is that some MSPs just aren't comfortable having that business level of conversation because they're motivated by fixing problems and helping people. The great thing about SMB1001 is, if the insurance company is encouraging the business to adopt this standard, and the standard says that you have to have this level of requirement, then they're just in there having a conversation saying, look, to meet gold, you've got to have this list of controls in place. And it just makes it, for them, I think it's been a nice segue for them to be able to have the conversations that they would prefer to have. And rather than them being somewhat uncomfortable about having the conversation, just being able to say it's being driven by industry, it's being driven by legislation, or it's actually a requirement for your insurance policy.
Are you finding that with some cyber insurance organizations, are they mandating a lot of these things, such as having an email filtering solution or even having multi-factor authentication? Are there any industry trends that you're seeing that are going to be mandated from an insurance premium perspective that businesses should be considerate of?
So without getting into the legalities of insurance policies, I would say that any organization that misrepresents their current position on their cyber insurance policy is putting themselves at risk. I would answer your question by saying the insurance providers that I work with are rewarding organizations for taking these preventative steps. And if you read their T's and C's, if there is a misrepresentation, then they're in a position where they can treat the policy as if it never existed.
Awesome. Quick question in regards to how small businesses adopt this. Why should they be adopting this standard, and what are sort of the fallbacks to consider?
Excellent question. So why? I think it comes back to, for these directors, being able to take a defensible position of, we've aligned to a recognized international framework as a reasonable step on our cybersecurity posture journey. I often refer to SMB1001, some of the earlier controls like silver and gold, as being the milestones that you may want to land on for a short period of time, but certainly not a destination that you would want to stay there for too long, depending on the volume of personally identifiable information or the impact of a cyber incident for an organization.
Yes. So, obviously with SMB1001, right, you can print out, you've got your bronze certification, silver, gold, etc. When you're having conversations with clients, are you finding that more valuable to actually show what they've done, like its tangible process or progress? Is that something that's factored in, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. As an MSP, and I would say for the MSPs that are watching this podcast, what we've done is we've actually used the more infant controls like bronze as an example to say, well, this is what we were offering as a package yesteryear. And because the threat landscape has evolved, your cyber prevention posture needs to evolve with that. So bronze was a managed service offering that we had in the 2019, 2020. But as that cyber prevention posture has evolved, gold is really that minimum standard that we've aimed to adopt. And visually, it's something that a non-technical person can identify with. So as the standard itself continues to evolve, and there's been a change between 2025 and 2026, an organization has a requirement to uplift, and they've got a reasonable period of time to get from the 2025 iteration of the standard to 2026. But ultimately, for us from an MSP perspective, we've aligned our packaging and our service offerings to those standards. So visually, a client can see there is a differentiation between a silver package, a silver managed services agreement versus a gold managed services agreement. And in some cases, our offerings do exceed into Essential 8 Maturity Level 2. We have bespoke offerings for SOC 2 and for ISO 27001, because they do become very detailed in the way that the organization's ISMS requires us to respond as a managed services provider. But the SMB1001 standard, it's elegantly simple, as I said a moment ago, and visually for those non-technical people, they can at least report back to the board, or they can report back to, ideally, their insurance provider and say, our MSP partner has advised that we are now at this standard, and this standard could be gold. Gold requires self-attestation, and I certainly would not encourage any client of ours to sign that off without written confirmation from us that they're at that particular cyber prevention posture. But we've gone as far as getting professional indemnity insurance around the advisory for Essential 8 and SMB 1001.
Good idea. Amazing. You mentioned insurance there. Now, when I've spoken with other MSPs and some of the guys from CyberCert as well, the insurance piece is definitely something that comes up a lot, right? So the silver side being that, what are they calling it? Straight away, essentially guaranteeing cyber insurance if you tick all the checkboxes. Have you guys gone down that path in terms of looking at cyber insurance providers through that, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and absolutely yes,
yeah.
and yes. So I think one of the great things, there are multiple cyber insurance providers within Australia. One that I've seen that has very deeply aligned to SMB 1001 is Emergence Insurance. So within their API system now, you can plug in your client details, turnover, and a few other particulars, and just their SMB 1001 posture, gold, silver, bronze, platinum, diamond, and it will give you back a policy. It'll just give you a figure. So they've turned something that could be 5 or 6 pages long, and in some cases for us, we would have to write additional context around responses, and they've turned it into a sub 10-minute process.
Amazing. And when starting to implement this for yourselves internally and for your customers, were you finding that any of the particular controls within the 3 tiers, bronze, silver, gold, what were the most impactful given the current threat landscape you were facing at that point?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I am going to say that when I first looked at SMB 1001, I kind of scoffed a little bit, because I had thought to myself, this is pretty basic. And transparently, my opinion is it should just be SMB 101. Like, this is the basic stuff that we should be doing. So to answer your question more comprehensively, I think for us, the depth around where we had exceeded certain controls, but because we didn't meet the control as it was written, we had to then pivot and double back and meet that control, because when we reached out to the managing body, DSI, and we said, hey, this is the posture that we've got, this is what the control states, for them, it was quite simple. You don't meet that control, you need to circle back and meet it. So there's been no harm in that. One of the things that I'm seeing with most of our clients, though, and really for MSPs, I think that the great opportunity here is to improve the cyber prevention posture for our clients. One of the places that I recommend that we start is actually with that asset register. Once you actually know the information that you have as an organization, then you can start to quantify the risk associated with that, and then put in place an investment strategy for protecting that data. And I think for us, the thing that's come out of it the most has just been how blindsided a lot of organizations have been about shadow IT. So we go into an organization and the marketing department's got a Dropbox account. And, oh, don't worry about it, we've only got marketing photos. And then the next thing you know, we start peeling back the layers, and it's like, actually, you've got a lot more information than just photos, and technically, should you have all of the photos there? Now, photos don't fall into PII in terms of serious harm, but you start peeling back the layers in terms of some of this other shadow IT, and there is a depth of risk that the organization as a whole didn't even know that they had.
I think it's a good point on the asset register. That's something that, I mean, if you look at other frameworks like CIS, it's number 1 and 2 is all about what do we have. And if you look at some of those ones, it's more, let's follow it in order, because how can we go and install, AV across every
You don't understand your hardware and your software assets. What's the attack surface looking like?
Well, I remember having a coffee with the CEO of an organization, I'm going to say almost 2 years ago now. I think it was just after PAX 8 Beyond 24. And the CEO of this organization, 130 odd staff, said to me, Sean, I'm not sure that we need to go this level of cyber prevention posture that you've encouraged us to go to. We really don't have that much PII. This organization has 19 servers still, so they're kind of a legacy setup. And we have a tool that we're able to deploy, and it traverses their environment and quantifies the PII that they've got. And on one of their 19 servers, we found $150 million worth of PII.
Wow.
And that's, how do you quantify that? That's first party and third party losses. But it meant for us, when we were talking about protecting that environment, that's the level of the volume of data that they had that they didn't even know was at risk within their organization. And it was able to adjust that conversation. And that's just one example of an organization that I would say, moderate sized organization, where they didn't even know. They weren't even able to quantify what their PII risk was. And this is what we're seeing almost every week.
Change of pace a little bit. What's your favorite control?
I'd have to say, I'm laughing because I think there's two parts to that. What's my favorite and what's my least favorite? I think the digital asset register really for me is my favorite. It's been that light bulb moment for a lot of organizations where they had no idea just how much data they were sitting on. So being able to quantify the unquantifiable, bringing it from something they weren't aware of into the forefront, and then being able to have a discussion around that has meant for us, we're having a mature conversation. We're having a seat at the table with their finance and their risk committee or their board, as opposed to kind of being tucked away at the side. So I think for that reason, the digital asset register is one of my favorite controls.
You surprised me with that one. I thought Control 1 would be your favourite, which is have an MSP.
Ironically, people are already talking to me about that sort of thing, so I guess I've discounted that. I think the control that has surprised me the most has been ensuring that any RDP is connected via a VPN. And I think to myself, folks, it's 2025. Why are we still having this conversation? Like in reality. So there's two parts to that. Digital asset register is my favorite, and seeing things like the VPN with RDP, I'm like, that should almost be a given. Going back to what I said, I know it's called SMB1001, but some of this stuff, it's pretty 101. It's fundamental stuff. And I think if you're going to go to the extent of putting a VPN in place, do the extra step and protect your VPN with multi-factor authentication. It's for me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Controversial one that I know a lot of MSPs that I have conversations with 50-50 on, and I think you probably know where this is going.
We'll see.
If we look at the bronze certification, one of the first things in there is change passwords routinely. Now, obviously, we've seen some changes in that perception over the last year or two.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that control?
I think that there are other controls and steps that can be put in place that would greatly enhance the cyber prevention posture over and above password rotations. I think changing passwords for the sake of changing passwords, if you haven't put these other controls into place, means that you're missing the opportunity to improve your cyber posture. I think having a password manager, which ensures that your passwords aren't stored in your web browser's cache or anything like that, is certainly a significantly better step. And ultimately, having a control that says, hey, change your passwords, doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a complex password in the way that a password manager would give you a 23 or a 26 or a 48 or whatever length you decide that you want to use. And I am pleased to say and see that the 26 iteration of SMB1001 has finessed the wording around that. I think it's important, and I think what I'm going to do right now is reiterate a number of things that have been spoken to me from the cyber experts, those that have a CISSP or a system, and Luke Irwin is one of those. His position on it is you change a password then when there have been indications of compromise. I think no organization likes going through the process of changing passwords and things like that. And if you're going to disrupt them from their normal flow of business activity, why not look at some of the other controls where you're going to get the opportunity to enhance their cyber prevention posture as opposed to it just being a tick box part of the process without any indications of compromise.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's the same stance that I have. I mean, if you look at security in general, you've typically, unfortunately, got a battle of security versus convenience, right? And unfortunately, if you end up in a scenario where you're constantly forcing people to change passwords, but you're not giving them the tool set to actually create A, unique and complex passwords, but B, ones that, or a method that they're going to be able to remember that, right? Like a password manager, then what you're going to end up with is, well, one of a couple of things. You're either going to end up with sticky notes everywhere. Now you've just created a whole new problem.
Seen that in a bank.
Yeah. Or you're going to end up in a scenario where people are reusing passwords, or they're changing them slightly. And look, I'll put my hand up. Before I got into cyber, this is something I used to do back at uni. That'd make us routinely change passwords every 6 months. I'd keep the exact same password, and I'd put a 1 on the end, or a 2, or a 3.
Yeah,
Guilty.
Well, let's keep it nice and secure and put an exclamation mark on the end.
Yeah.
Bit of a symbol.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and the irony of that is if you go and have a look on the dark web now, you'll probably find all of those passwords that you've used in yesteryear are sitting in some sort of data breach database.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think if we can pivot the conversation for a moment, the benefits in setting up mature conditional access policies for compliance, ensuring that your endpoints are enrolled in your Entra ID, that they have the right level of encryption, that their endpoint security has checked in. I think these are substantially better controls that can be put in place than let's just change the password. Because contextually, if you change your password, if a user changes their password and that password is then phished from that user again, well, the likelihood of a threat actor getting in is still moderately high, in contrast to putting in place these conditional access policies that says, yeah, great, not great's not the right term, they've got your username, they've got your password, heck, they've got your token for TOTP, but they're not operating from a device that's in compliance. They're not operating from a device that's enrolled within Entra ID. And so if you've got the right monitoring in place, you're going to pick that up as an indication of compromise in a successful authentication within your environment, but they haven't been able to access any of the data. If all we're doing on the flip side is changing passwords and that user gets phished, there's still a likelihood that they're going to compromise a mailbox or compromise an M365 tenancy. And that's kind of what I mean in regards to let's pick what's going to yield the better return for the organization in terms of improving their cyber prevention posture.
Awesome. And you've worked with both frameworks, Essential 8 and SMB 1001. What are sort of the main differences that you find in responding to incidents when aligned to SMB 1001 in comparison to the broad recommendations of Essential 8?
So not only have we worked with Essential 8 and SMB 1001, we've also worked with SOC 2 and ISO 27001. And what I've tried to do as an MSP is align the response that we have to meet whichever one of the controls is required. So for example, in Essential 8, there is a requirement to patch critical vulnerabilities within 48 hours. And in some cases, we actually go to the extent of not just looking at the operating system and some of the applications. We look at all of the applications within their environment. We're looking at the threat intel. So we've kind of taken some of the controls, the good parts of Essential 8, and we've rolled them through into our SMB 1001 and vice versa. We still have these frameworks to align to, and ultimately we understand the SLA requirements that we have for each of these. But really what we're doing is we're taking the best of each of them. And in a lot of cases, and I don't mind saying this for the SMB community, for the MSP community, for each of those controls, we've gone and addressed the steps that were missing. SMB 1001 includes some email security controls in their 26 iteration. It wasn't there in their 25 iteration. It was just part of our standard service offering.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good point there, and it actually relates to what we were talking about with the password piece as well, in that the thing I really like about SMB 1001 at the moment, because it is such a new framework, is they're listening to what the feedback is. They're taking that on board, and then they're changing. So what we've seen in terms of changes from the 2026 has improved on what was going on in the 2025. Obviously, there is a steering committee, and they are listening to that feedback. I guess, have you had a look through the 2026 one?
Had a bit of light reading on the plane on the way down to a conference a week and a half ago.
Nice. So what were your thoughts on how that's evolved from the 2025? Do you think they're moving in the right direction? Is the feedback being heard?
Yes is the short answer to that. Reading through the controls on the way down to Sydney for conference, I was pleased to see they are making positive steps. They're steps in the right direction. I think they'll be the first to admit that it's not a perfect framework. And the framework itself is designed for SMB. It's not an enterprise framework. It has the capability to roll into enterprises, and in fact we're having conversations with certain schools and some large organizations in regards to at least using it as one of those milestones on their journey through to ISO 27001. So we're kind of encouraging organizations to take a blended approach. It's still missing a couple of things. I don't think they would mind me saying it. So our service catalog does incorporate plugging the missing gaps that we feel are the things that we see threat actors exploiting most frequently. But to your point, they have a steering committee. They listen to their steering committee. I'm a member of SMB IT, and SMB IT collectively has a seat at the table. Being part of the committee within SMB IT for the SMB 1001 framework means that we can directly influence the consideration of those controls, and I'm really pleased to say that there are a number of things that have been highlighted as a committee that have been incorporated into SMB 1001, the 2026 iteration. So I think they're being really agile. It's great to see how quickly they're responding to things, and certainly if you look at the frequency of updates for Essential 8 versus how frequently SMB 1001 are updating their controls, it's a positive thing. I would just say to the community as a whole, it's your business. You're an MSP, and if there are things that you think should be done over and above what's in the controls for SMB 1001, you get to write the rules for your MSP. Just go ahead and incorporate them into your service catalog. That's exactly what we've done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And as you said, staying agile, staying up to date is always important, especially from a security perspective, because they're doing it on the other side. They're constantly evolving. They're constantly changing. So it becomes really important for us to make sure that we're doing that from a defense perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the nice thing that I've seen, particularly with SMB 1001, is the adoption by insurance providers. And it's not just emergency insurance. I'm seeing a number of insurance brokers having proactive conversations with their clientele. And part of the conversation that we're having with them when they reach out to us and say, hey, our insurance provider has said we should be considering this controls, is great. What were their motivations? The short answer is because it will positively affect our annual premium. Insurance providers are, the good ones, actively incentivizing businesses for adopting the SMB1001 controls, which is great to see.
Indeed. And especially with initiatives such as the Cyber Wardens program, enabling people to get to bronze, and there's been a couple of other initiatives in the last couple of weeks, what would your advice be to other MSPs who are looking to adopt this framework as a starting point? How could they get started?
Well, I'd say the first step is if you're not part of a community yet, a community like I would say the first thing would be, if you're not part of a community like SMBIT, reach out. SMBIT has a wealth of members that have committed to and are now at the SMB1001 Gold standard. They have members now at the Platinum standard, and they also have members at the Diamond standard. And I'm not saying this just because I'm in the PAX8 studio, but PAX8's also committed a fair amount of resources to the standards. So as an MSP, if you haven't had the conversation, reach out to your CAM at PAX8. They can certainly put you in contact with a number of other MSPs that have worked through this. Heck, I did a workshop. I had 17 MSPs at my office, and we unpacked one of the first iterations of the 25 standard in detail, just so that we could get that rapid adoption, so that as an MSP community, we could deploy that through to our organizations, our clients, with a depth of understanding, and helped them, educated them on the depth of complexities above that. Well, it's just a pretty surface level basic control. It's an elegantly simple framework, but the beauty is in the depth of controls and the elegance of its simplicity.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think community is a big piece of that. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Josh, Sean, this was a really insightful discussion from my perspective. I'm really very excited to see what other frameworks we're going to cover in this podcast series. For those of you at home, if you've got any questions, please chuck your thoughts in the comments, or reach out to your local account manager and see if they can help you from the SMB1001 side. Sean, am I right in saying that people can also get in touch with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I work with a number of other MSPs around coaching and advisory. Anyone who's listening is welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And to everyone at home, see you in the next episode of Frameworks in Focus.
See you then.